Thank you very much, Brian. So maybe I could just start with a brief description of the Climate Change Committee, because I'm aware that perhaps some people in the audience may not be fully familiar with it. So the UK Climate Change Committee is an independent and statutory body, and it was established under the Climate Change Act of 2008. And our role is to advise the UK and devolved governments on emission targets and also to report to Parliament on progress in relation to preparing for and adapting to climate change impacts. So that's our broad remit. So I think it's important that we have this independent role, and it's a statutory role as well, enshrined in the 2008 Climate Change Act. And yes, you're right, Brian, in our 2021 advice report to government for the third climate change risk assessment highlighted these risks from exposure to heat as one of the top 8 risks requiring urgent action from government within the next 2 years. So we really tried to emphasise that this was a very pressing issue. And indeed, we followed that up early this year in July 2022 with this report, if I could just... available to download on the excellent Climate Change Committee's site if you're interested. So this is Risk to Health, Wellbeing and Productivity from Overheating in Buildings. It's a relatively brief report, about 30 pages, which tries to be a kind of one-stop shop, I think, for the committee's views on this matter, and also provides, I think, around 16 recommendations to the UK government to address this really pressing issue. And I wonder if I could just, in this brief few minutes we have at the beginning, just really highlight the 4 key conclusions from that report. So I'll just run through them very briefly, if I may. So the first conclusion was that impacts from periods of high temperature are already being felt in the UK. So this is happening now. And apologies that this has a UK focus, but I guess it is the UK Climate Change Committee. I know the discussion this evening will be. So these effects are being felt now in the UK. There's a growing evidence-based linking increased temperatures to health impacts and reduced productivity, including impact on key services such as education and healthcare. And we know, for example, that there are several thousand heat-related deaths each year, typically in the UK. And that, for example, around 20% of UK homes are already overheating. So that's the first conclusion, that this is an issue that's real, it's happening now in the UK. The second conclusion was that, unfortunately, it's projected to get worse. Climate predictions suggest that even the hot summer we had, say, in 2018 will be an average summer by 2050. That's even with the deep cuts in emissions that are required. So the combination of the increasing hot weather associated with that, combined with an ageing population, means sadly that heat-related deaths could treble in the UK without further adaptation actions. I guess the third of the 4 conclusions is a rather more positive one, that there are multiple effective strategies that can address these issues, and that's what we'll be talking about this evening. And they don't have to be air conditioning, I think. And we try to suggest, of course, this kind of cooling hierarchy in the report that I think we'll all be familiar with. And then the final and 4th conclusion was that government has a crucial role to play here in encouraging a proactive adaptation to limit overheating health and well-being impacts. And what we really need to see in the UK is a very clear vision from the government. What does a well-adapted UK building stock look like? And backing this up with clear and quantifiable targets, a set of indicators that are quantifiable and measurable and will allow progress to be assessed. We currently can't do that adequately for adaptation in the UK. Have I got 1 or 2 minutes more left, or would you like me to stop there? I'm keeping going then, if that's the fact, yeah. It's just in the last couple of minutes. Also in the report were a series of cross-cutting enabling factors that we wanted to highlight that we felt were absolutely necessary to adapt to these risks. And the first one of those was the essential, in our view, interaction with net zero, and the government must ensure that all policies for decarbonisation, such as energy efficiency retrofit, actively consider adaptation and ensure that such policies don't lead to unintended consequences, such as impacts on health in homes, for example. Secondly, there's a skills issue here. We know that adapting the stock will require a growing and skilled workforce to install these measures effectively and a supply chain to support them. 3 more to go. Third one is public engagement, and I think we tried to emphasise how vitally important we thought that was, both for adaptation, but also, and it's fairly topical at the moment, for advising householders, for example, how to reduce energy demand and therefore energy bills. The fourth out of the five, finance. Government needs to ensure that they make finance available for adaptation actions. Some of this might come from government, some of it from other mechanisms. And then finally, even if we have effective regulation, then it's vital that we have effective and strong enforcement and compliance. I think we could maybe argue that that isn't the case at the moment, and that government must ensure that local authorities, for example, are properly funded and able to enforce standards. So I'll stop there.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. That's really great setting the scene.